Hi, everyone. Welcome to the ATDev podcast. So happy to be joined today by Julie Reiskin, a disability rights advocate and co-executive director of the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. Hey, Julie, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks, Owen. How are you?
Doing great. Yeah, thank you for being here. So, yeah, it'd be great if you could, introduce yourself and talk a bit about your background and a little bit about CCDC.
Sure. As you said, I'm the one of the co-executive directors of the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. I'm the older one. My co-director Hillary is, I say, the younger, smarter one. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been with CCDC, we call it the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, in different forms since for about 30 years. And I've been a community organizer and into social change my entire life, my entire career, even from the time when I was very young, before I was even really in a professional space. My background and training is as a social worker, and I'm what's called a macro practitioner, meaning I work on bigger systems. So, the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition is a membership organization. We have over 7,000 members, mostly in Colorado, but members can be from anywhere, and membership is free to anyone who supports our mission. People can join at ccdconline.org. Our mission is to build power in the disability community for the purpose of advocating for social justice for people with all types of disabilities. And that's what cross disability means.
Yeah.
Cross disability means that we believe that we have more in common than not, and that people with all types of disabilities do better when we work together.
Yeah, that's so cool. I've been involved in a lot of different disability advocacy organizations, Center for Independent Living and others. And I think CCDC is really distinct in its operations. And I think one way of describing it is constituent engagement. And I was wondering if maybe you could, talk a little bit about your philosophy there and really what do you think separates CCDC from some of the other organizations?
Yeah, our tagline is nothing about us without us ever, and the ever's in all caps with
Yeah.
exclamation points. So we believe that constituent engagement means that it has to be embedded everywhere in the organization. So it doesn't mean that someone else makes all the decisions, then invite someone in for a focus group or at the last minute to say, hey, what do you think? It means that it's messy, first of all. It means that constituents are involved, again, at all levels, including leadership from day one. It also involves being comfortable with conflict, and that in both ideas and style. So when
Yeah.
you have disability is not a monolith. So we are a very diverse population of people with disabilities. We're statewide, so we have people from all over the state with all types of disabilities, all ages, all different skill sets, all different viewpoints. So it's messy. And people will have different styles and different ideas. That doesn't mean that when we do work, it's a free for all. We have processes where we make decisions and then we stick to decisions. We have a leadership structure, but people who are directly involved are always part of those decisions and always part of those discussions. The vast majority of our staff are people with disabilities, and a majority of our board are either people with disabilities or immediate family members. So it also involves the understanding that not everyone comes from the same place or has the same knowledge, but that always the consumer is not less knowledgeable than the professional.
Yeah.
So often people will say, oh, we need to have a special training to teach the client members about whatever policy or practice or whatever, but never assuming that there needs to be special training for the professional members to understand about our lives or about anything else. So we see it as that everyone comes in with expertise and we all train each other. The other thing, we do a lot of work with governments and larger providers about constituent engagement, often sometimes from an advocacy perspective of we are telling them that they're doing it wrong, and sometimes
Yeah.
when we're invited in to help them do it. And one of the things that we always say is make sure that you are clear about what the engagement is Are you bringing in people on an advisory capacity or decision making? If it's
Mm,
advisory, that's okay, but you have to be honest about that. And then you have to be really respectful when you're given advice of taking that advice. And if it's something that you just can't do for whatever reason, explain why, and then engage in further discussion of maybe what's another way to get to what people are suggesting. If it's decision making, then make sure people have what they need to make decisions. It also involves making sure that we are paying attention to power dynamics and working to mitigate those power dynamics.
yeah,
What I mean by that is if you're talking, for example, about mental health care in a small community, there are going to be people in the room who have direct experience using mental health services, direct experience providing mental health services, and there might be someone in the room that someone else in the room has actually put on a mental health hold at some point.
right.
You have to be sensitive to those dynamics, again, particularly in small communities, but really everywhere. You have to be sensitive to other kinds of power dynamics, like people who might have a lot more money, people who might have a lot more experience with systems, and just work to, I'm so sorry,
Oh,
just work
no,
to
it's
mitigate that.
no problem.
Yeah, and work to mitigate that and work to make sure that those things are addressed up front and openly and honestly. You're not going to get rid of power dynamics. Those exist in
Right.
the world. But often what happens is people are brought in when there's wildly different power structures. And then everyone's okay, we're all equal here in this room. No, we're not.
Yeah,
And that's really disingenuous and very threatening to people who are on the lower end of the power spectrum. So it's better to just be honest and upfront. And sometimes you do have to do things to equalize the power. For example, make sure that if people are coming in with different knowledge levels, that maybe the group that doesn't have all of the information has a briefing ahead of time so
yeah,
that they know, even just like what the words are, so that they know what the process is going to be, and that they're not just sitting there feeling stupid because they don't know everything that's happening. That it's facilitated in a way that's respectful of different knowledge and not assuming that the professional knowledge is the only knowledge.
right.
And then finally, I think it means making room for constituents to get into paid positions of power and helping people get qualified for those so that they can do the work. So it's not always the disabled people are not always just the clients or just the end user, but we are also the boss, the
Yeah,
facilitator, the developer, the whatever the thing is that we are involved in that. So that does a lot to equalize the power.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of able-bodied people or people that don't have experience with the disability community don't see that there are different levels of power dynamics even in the disability community. Whether or not you're eligible for a certain service, like you said, it might also depend just on your ability to navigate bureaucracy, which is not something that is evenly distributed. And I think one of the really unique things to me about CCDC is that it blends legal advocacy with real lawyers and people who are intimately aware of what is legally required for accommodations with other types of advocacy. And I think that's a really unique model and something that I haven't really seen anywhere else. And I've seen disability law organizations and disability advocacy organizations. Really, the power of both of them are when they come together. And yeah, I just wondered if you could maybe talk a little bit more about that, philosophy. Was that intentional or and why has that maybe not spread to other organizations and how can people learn to, learn from that?
Yeah, so it was intentional. I think there's a couple reasons why. So, first of all, the American Civil Liberties Union practices this model also, both nationally and I know in the Colorado affiliate, they do also. I happen to serve on their board, so I know that for a
Oh,
fact.
great.
But it is unusual. And I think the reason is, first of all, it's hard. Lawyers think in a certain way, and those of us that are not lawyers think in a certain way.
Yeah,
And
thankfully.
does take a lot of work to blend those cultures. You might see that in the scientific world, where I assume like engineers maybe think a certain
Yeah,
way and other people in your world think a certain way, because
absolutely.
certain professions, people are just trained to think in a certain way. So it definitely takes a lot of time for like people to get to know each other and talk and understand each other's perspectives. And it's not always smooth and it's not always easy. It was intentional because early on, when I got into a position of leadership, I actually had a personal experience where lawyers were needed and realized, wow, this is so hard for people with disabilities to navigate. We need to do something. And
Mm,
then by kind of trial and error, we ended up with a legal program. We now have two legal programs and feel really strongly that lawyers hold such a position of power in the society. And so much of what we do as people with disabilities is based on enforcement of laws that no one else will enforce,
yeah,
that it was really important that we do something to try and have that access. And it's important. I also think another reason is lawyers are more expensive than non-lawyers. They just
mm,
are. But, and I think you're right, there's legal organizations and then there's other organizations. And even within advocacy, we often have people say, are you grass tops? Do you do policy advocacy and legislative work? Or do you do grassroots advocacy, which is community organizing? And the answer is yes, we do both.
right.
And we do legal work and we do individual advocacy, so that we are always hearing directly from actual people what are the problems. And we
Yeah,
believe that you've got to really do all of that along with community education and community engagement and all of that stuff. You can't, even within other non-legal advocacy, if you just do legislative work but then you're not working with the state agencies or federal agencies on implementing the laws, you're missing a big piece. If you're not helping people that are getting caught in the system once you've created a law or a program, you're missing a piece. And sometimes you need the lawyers to hold people accountable. If you look at our government in the United States, it was based on three branches, and they're supposed to be co-equal branches. The legislative branch makes the laws, the executive branch implements the laws, and the judicial branch enforces the laws. So
right.
we model ourselves around the need to have all three of those operations going, all advocacy in all three branches.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really smart. And I think it harkens back the early days of the disability rights movement when,
Right.
you were really fighting for legal protections of disability and were saying, hey, yeah, we should legally be able to participate in society as well as an able-bodied person. And I think that being a bit critical of some disability rights organizations these days, I think they've kind of taken their foot off the pedal in some respects and aren't really holding their governments and their representatives accountable in a lot of ways. And I think that CCDC is a big reason why Colorado's disability community is, think, well protected in a lot of ways. And also, one of the big reasons that inspired me to move back to Colorado from California was the Working Disabled program. That's something that most states don't have, or the versions that they do have aren't as good as the one here in Colorado. I was wondering if maybe you could just talk a little bit about the history of that specific program and how important it is to our community.
Yeah, thanks. It's called the Working Adults with Disabilities Program, but we call it colloquially the buy-in. It's a Medicaid buy-in program for working adults with disabilities. It was a very long time in coming. It took us quite a long time to get it going, but when we finally did, and then when we finally got it done, we had to then fix some things, but when we finally got it going, it's been a really important program. It's the only path out of poverty for people with disabilities. And what it does is it lets people keep their Medicaid, whether it's just regular, like the health insurance part of Medicaid, or also the health insurance plus the long-term care part of Medicaid, which is what a lot of people can't live without. That's like what pays for our attendant care and
Yep,
yeah.
myself included.
Yeah. So you can have, if you qualify for the long term care functionally, you get that. or just the regular Medicaid. If you don't, some people don't need the long-term care, but they might need access to their medications or other things that they might not be able to get through regular insurance because of their disability. So if you have a disability, which is using the Social Security definition, but they don't ask the question, do you work? With regular Social Security, if you're working, you're not eligible. This is just their medical definition of disability, which are listings. So if you qualify for that, if you're disabled by those standards, you don't have to go on Social Security or SSI or anything. It's just a process, and you have a job, and it can be any job, you are eligible for this program. There is an income cap, but it's really high, and there's no asset cap. So you're allowed to have a retirement account and save money, which is really important if living independently. Even if you don't make a lot of money, being able to have some savings is really important. I know a few years ago, I was unlucky enough to have the hail and my roof have a conflict and my roof lost.
Oh
And
boy.
even the deductible was more than $2,000, which is all you're allowed
Uh,
to have in savings without this program. So it's important for people to be allowed to save money for those literally rainy days. The other thing is that you're always a household of one. So the whole marriage penalty thing goes away. If you are a parent and let's say you're getting child support for your kids, that isn't really considered. It's really just what you earn. And the other thing that's cool is we buy into our Medicaid. We pay for our Medicaid. Now, granted,
yeah,
we don't pay a lot. We would pay a lot more with insurance, but we are paying something. And a lot of people with disabilities really want to be able to pay into their Medicaid. We
yeah,
don't want it for free. We want it, we want to be able to afford it. And because there is no other insurance that works for us. So Medicaid is our only option. But for years and years, people were saying, let us work, we'll pay, we're happy to pay.
yeah,
The reason why this is a true work incentive and what they're doing on the federal level is not, is that first of all, it's voluntary. If someone isn't able to work, they can be on the regular Medicaid that we've always had.
yeah,
They would then be limited to a low income and the asset test, but they can still have Medicaid. So they don't lose their benefits if they are unable to work. And second of all, the payment is affordable and it's based on a sliding scale. So those of us that are making more pay more. There are people on this buy-in program whose premium payment is zero because they make so little. And the other thing is it doesn't have a set amount of hours that we have to work because people with disabilities have all different levels. Some people, because of their disability, can't work a lot of hours. So you can be on this program, whether we've known people that what they're only medically able to do is maybe work just 5 hours a week, or you can
yeah,
have people that, like me, where I work two jobs. So
yeah,
anything in between, and that's fine. And what people can do changes over time. So I will probably have a time when I can't work two jobs and maybe when I can't even work full time. That's okay. You can go up and down as you're able.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really an example of, like you said, a work incentive program that actually works, and
Yeah.
it makes sense. And I think any policymakers listening to this can really learn a lot from Colorado's buy-in program.
Yeah. Now, I do want to say we're worried about something, which is that the funding mechanism comes from something called the hospital provider tax. And HR1, which is the big bill, I will not call it a beautiful bill, but a big
Yeah,
bill that was
definitely.
passed last year, cuts that revenue in half starting in a couple years, like from 28 to 32, 2028 to 2032. So we are very worried about that and worried about hopefully overturning that or finding other revenue to keep this going because it's been amazing. I can't remember the number of people, but every time I look, it's more and more people with disabilities that are working. And you can see it even in the census data that the employment number for people with disabilities in Colorado has continued to rise with this program, even during the pandemic when employment numbers were sinking everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's again where efficacy at every level comes into play. And yeah, that's what's so important about it.
Yeah.
Julie, thank you so much for your time today. I always learn something new chatting with you. And if, yeah, people want to learn more or connect? Where can they go for more information?
Okay, we would welcome membership. So you can go, our website is probably the best place. We're also on LinkedIn, but the website is ccdconline.org. And there should be a big join us thing, and there should be stuff right up there about if you need advocacy yourself, or if you want to get involved. Our legislative session it ends in a month, less than a month, I think, at this point. But we do every year, we do trainings for people that want to be involved as a volunteer lobbyist. And then every Sunday night, we have meetings where we go over legislative strategy during the legislative session, which is from January to May in Colorado. I think we started in November when the budget starts. During the summer, we're going to have a series of listening tours. We have virtual town halls always, and any member gets notified. We're going to go into some rural communities and have some listening tours this year where we just talk to people in the community, hear what their pain points are, what they want to see differently, let people know what's going to change, what's changed in the law, what hasn't. And we have events, particularly during the summer. We're going to have in September a Beats and Barbecue event in Denver, which is just a fun time to come hang out. It'll be a free event. There's some ticketed things you can buy because it is a fundraiser. We also have our ADA Awards event every year, which is our bigger fundraiser. That will be July 24th this year. So we invite people to join any of these things that they want to join. Our ADA event is looking for sponsorships. If there's any companies listening, you can find out about that. Also on our website, our development director would be more than happy to talk to you about that. And we invite people to join and participate in anything you want. We talk a lot about Medicaid, but we do other things other than Medicaid. We have a transit academy coming up for people that are interested in transportation advocacy. We also connect people to other kinds of advocacy if that's what they're interested in. If someone's interested in housing, there are other housing groups that we would connect people with.
Awesome. Thank you again, Julie, and thank you to all our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share, and stay tuned to the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.